Beneath a moon, veiled in crimson haze, the snow whispered secrets of forgotten oaths, as if the earth itself mourned the breaking of a fragile bond. Ilara's breath fogged the frigid air, each exhale a fragile rebellion against the cold that clawed at her bones. She stumbled through the whispering pines, the forest's edge blurring into the forbidden veil that separated her world from the shadowed realms beyond. The pack's howls echoed faintly behind her, not in pursuit, but in dismissal, a chorus of indifference that cut deeper than any fang. Rejected, banished. The word tasted like ash on her tongue, a poison she had swallowed whole when her mate, the beta she had dared to love, had turned his eyes away, claiming her spirit too wild, too untamed for the rigid hierarchies of the moon-sworn clans. The wind howled through the branches like a lament, carrying the metallic tang of distant blood and the low, guttural murmurs of things that stirred only under the night sky. Ilara clutched the silver locket at her throat, its chain cold against her skin, a heirloom from her mother. A simple oval etched with lunar phases, now stained with a single dried drop of her own blood from the ritual that had sealed her exile. It was all she had left, this tiny vessel of memory, pulsing faintly as if alive with the heartbeat of the Dusa herself. The pack elders had stripped her of everything else, her furs, her status, even the mark of belonging on her wrist. "Go," they had said, their voices flat as frozen earth, "or die among us as the outcast you are." She had chosen to run, deeper into the mist-shrouded borderlands where the wolves' territories bled into the eternal night of the vampires. Forbidden ground, whispered of in terrified tales around the hearth fires, lands where the undead kings ruled with eyes like polished obsidian and hungers that devoured more than flesh. No shifter crossed that line and returned unchanged, if they returned at all. But what choice did she have? The alternative was a slow death in the wilds, picked off by rival packs or the merciless winter that gripped the northern mountains like a lover's unyielding grasp. The snow deepened as she pressed on, crunching under her bare feet until numbness crept up her legs. A merciful thief stealing the pain of thorns and roots. The moon hung low, its light fracturing through the canopy in silver shards that painted the ground in ethereal patterns. Ilara's wolf spirit whimpered within her, subdued by the rejection's weight, but it urged her forward, instincts honed by years of survival in a world that valued strength over softness. She was an omega, born to soothe and mend, yet her pack had seen only weakness in her quiet empathy, her refusal to bow blindly to the alpha's decrees. When the beta had renounced their bond under the full moon's witness, the shame had rippled through the clan like a curse, marking her as flawed, unworthy. A distant uivo pierced the night, not wolf, but something older, more resonant, like the echo of bones rattling in the wind. Ilara froze, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The air grew thicker, laced with the scent of damp stone and decay, as if the forest itself recoiled from what lay ahead. She glanced back, the path she had carved through the underbrush already erasing itself under fresh snowfall. No turning back. The locket warmed slightly against her chest, an illusion perhaps, or a sign from the Diusa that even in exile she was not utterly alone. As the trees thinned, the ground sloped into a ravine, its walls jagged with ice-sheathed rocks that gleamed like fangs under the moonlight. Below, a frozen river snaked through the valley, its surface cracked and veined with dark currents that hinted at hidden depths. This was the threshold, the veil of eternal dusk, where the vampire's domain began. Legends spoke of their citadels carved from black ice, thrones forged from the bones of ancient foes, and kings who walked the night burdened by eternities of regret. Ilara had never believed the stories fully, dismissing them as warnings to keep the young from wandering. But now, with the pack's rejection burning in her veins like silver nitrate, she sought refuge in the monster's shadow. She descended carefully, fingers scraping against the icy ledge for purchase, the cold seeping into her palms until they bled faintly. Each drop fell to the snow, staining it red like scattered rose petals, a stark contrast to the white expanse. The locket swung free as she slipped, catching the moon's glow, and for a moment she swore it hummed. a low vibration that resonated with the pulse in her throat. Was it fear or something awakening? Her wolf stirred faintly, nostrils flaring at unfamiliar scents, earth rich with old blood, the faint smoke of unseen fires, and beneath it all, a masculine allure that was both predatory and profoundly weary. At the ravine's bottom, Ilara collapsed against a boulder, her body racked with shivers. The wind carried a new sound now, footsteps, soft and deliberate, crunching the snow with predatory grace. Not hers. She lifted her head, eyes widening as a figure emerged from the tree line opposite, cloaked in shadows that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. Tall, broad-shouldered, he moved with the lethal elegance of a storm contained, his face half hidden beneath a hood lined with dark fur. But it was his eyes that seized her, crimson-flecked silver, glowing faintly in the lunar light, marking him as no mere wanderer. He paused, scenting the air, and Ilara's breath caught. Vampire. King or not, he was danger incarnate, yet there was no immediate snarl or lunge. Instead, a flicker of something haunted crossed his features, as if her presence stirred ghosts long buried. The locket at her throat burned now, hot against her chilled skin, and in that instant, the moon above seemed to watch, waiting for the threads of fate to tangle. She should run, she should hide, but exhaustion pinned her in place, and curiosity, a dangerous spark in the Omega's soul, held her gaze to his. In the forbidden lands, exile had led her here, to the edge of another world's hunger, and perhaps to redemption she had never sought. The figure stepped fully into the moonlight, his cloak parting like raven wings to reveal the sharp lines of a face forged in eternal shadow. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears, a wild drumbeat against the silence of the ravine as she pressed herself flatter against the boulder. His eyes, those crimson-flecked silver orbs, locked onto hers with an intensity that stripped away the night, as if he could see not just her form huddled in the snow, but the fractures in her soul. He was no ordinary night stalker. The air around him hummed with ancient power, a crown of frost-kissed authority that marked him as something regal, something cursed. She should have fled. The wolf within her snarled a warning, instincts screaming of predators who feasted on the weak, on Omegas like her who had already been cast aside. But her limbs betrayed her, heavy with exhaustion and the strange pull of his gaze, like a tether woven from moonlight and regret. He moved closer, each step silent on the snow, his boots leaving no print, as if the earth itself yielded to his will. Up close, she saw the weariness etched into his features, high cheekbones shadowed by stubble, lips pressed into a line of restrained hunger, and a faint scar tracing his jaw, silvered like the locket at her throat. Blood, old and faint, stained the cuff of his glove, not his own, but a remnant of some recent violence that clung to him like a shroud. Who dares cross the veil? His voice was a low rumble, resonant as distant thunder rolling through the mountains, laced with an accent that evoked crumbling thrones and forgotten wars. Not a question born of rage, but of weary caution, as if intrusions were rare omens in his endless nights. Ilara's breath hitched, the cold air burning her lungs. She clutched the locket tighter, its warmth now a steady pulse against her palm, sinking inexplicably with the faint throb she sensed in him. A heartbeat? No, vampires were myths of the undead, hearts stilled by the Deuce's cruel jest. Yet there it was, an echo of life, burdened and solitary. I had no choice, she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice underfoot. Fear coiled in her gut, sharp as thorns, but beneath it stirred curiosity, a forbidden spark that made her lift her chin despite the tremor in her limbs. He was beautiful in his lethality, his form clad in dark leathers reinforced with silver thread, a broadsword sheathed at his side, humming with enchanted runes. The wind tugged at his hood, revealing hair as black as raven feathers falling in disheveled waves. But it was the guilt in his eyes that held her, a shadow deeper than the ravine's gloom, as if he carried the weight of a kingdom's sins upon his shoulders. He tilted his head, inhaling deeply, and Ilara felt exposed, her scent, wild pine, fresh blood from her scraped hands, and the subtle musk of her Omega essence, betraying her shifter blood. His nostrils flared, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before it hardened into suspicion. A wolf, from the clans beyond the pines. You reek of exile and desperation. He did not advance further, but his presence loomed, the air thickening with the scent of aged wine and iron-rich earth, stirring memories of hearth fires she could no longer claim. The locket grew hotter, almost searing, and she wondered if it was the Deuce's warning or her own blood responding to the proximity of this stranger's ancient sorrow. She shifted, snow crunching softly, her bare feet numb but her senses alive. They cast me out. My mate. He rejected the bond, said I was too wild, a flaw in their perfect order. The words spilled unbidden, raw as an open wound, and she hated the vulnerability in them. Why confess to this creature of the night? Yet his gaze softened fractionally, a crack in the armor of his stoic facade, as if her pain mirrored some echo in his own eternal vigil. The packs are merciless to the broken, he murmured, almost to himself, his voice threading with a melancholy that surprised her. As are the shadows we rule. He glanced skyward, where the moon hung like a watchful eye, its crimson veil deepening as clouds scudded across its face. A distant Weevo, wolf or wind, carried on the breeze, and Alara tensed, the pack's dismissal still fresh enough to sting. But he did not pounce. Instead, he extended a gloved hand, not in threat, but as if testing the fragile space between them. I am Draven, king of the eternal dusk. These lands swallow the unwary wolf kin. What makes you think a vampire's mercy will spare you? The question hung between them, heavy as falling snow, and Alara's heart warred within her chest. Instinct urged flight, the Omega's survival honed by years of soothing tempers she could never fully tame. Yet curiosity bloomed, irrational and insistent, drawn to the quiet storm in his eyes, the guilt that mirrored her shame, the weariness that spoke of duties unchained from joy. She did not take his hand, but she did not recoil either, her fingers brushing the locket as if seeking strength from its bloodied core. Mercy? I seek only shelter from the storm. If your shadows offer that, then perhaps the Deuce has woven our paths for a reason. Draven's lips curved in a ghost of a smile, bitter and fleeting, as if such fates were jests played by indifferent gods. The connection sparked there, instinctive and unwelcome, a thread of empathy pulling taut amid the fear. He was predator, she prey, exile and king, divided by blood and borders. Yet in that shared silence, under the moon's unblinking gaze, something stirred. Not love, but the raw potential of it, resisted like a flame too bright for the dark. The wind howled louder, carrying the faint clamor of pursuit from the tree line, perhaps her pack's echoes, or his own realm's unrest. Draven's eyes narrowed, the crimson in them flaring. The night closes in. Follow if you value your life, or stay and become the snow's forgotten offering. He turned, cloak swirling like spilled ink, and Alara hesitated only a heartbeat before rising, the locket's warmth urging her onward into the unknown. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Alara's footsteps echoed Draven's in the deepening gloom, each crunch of snow a reluctant surrender to the path unfolding before her. The ravine twisted into a narrow defile, its walls rising like the ribs of some ancient beast, sheathed in ice that caught the moon's fractured light and hurled it back in jagged prisms. The wind clawed at her, whipping her threadbare tunic against her skin, but the locket's warmth persisted, a steady ember against the chill invading her core. She stole glances at the vampire king striding ahead, his cloak a flowing shadow that swallowed the night, his silence as impenetrable as the frost-laced stone around them. He led her without words, his pace unyielding yet measured, as if aware of her faltering strength. The air grew heavier, laced with the scent of pine resin and something sharper, smoke, faint but insistent, curling from hidden fissures in the rock. Alara's wolf senses sharpened, despite the exhaustion weighing her limbs. She caught the distant murmur of water, not the frozen river below, but a warmer current, perhaps a geothermal spring defying the eternal winter. Draven halted abruptly at a sheer cliff face, his gloved hand pressing against a seam invisible to her eyes. A low rumble answered, stone grinding on stone, and a concealed crevice yawned open, exhaling a breath of steam that tasted of minerals and secrecy. "Inside," he commanded, his voice a velvet command edged with urgency. "The Vale's guardians stir. Your scent has drawn them already." Ilara hesitated, peering into the dim passage where torchlight flickered from unseen depths, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford, yet the howls echoing from the tree line, her pack's relentless echoes, or worse, propelled her forward. She slipped past him, the crevice sealing behind with a finality that echoed her isolation. The cavern unfolded in layers of wonder and warning, walls veined with quartz that glowed faintly under the moon's indirect gaze filtering through cracks above. Pools of steaming water ringed by crystalline formations, and a central chamber hollowed like a throne room, its floor strewn with furs worn soft by centuries. Draven moved with purpose, kindling a fire from embers hidden in a niche, flames leaping to life with a hunger that mirrored his crimson-flecked eyes. He shed his cloak, revealing the lean power of his frame, armored in supple leather etched with runes that pulsed like veins. A faint tremor in his hand, as he tossed a fur toward her, did not escape her notice. Not weakness, but restraint, as if the act of offering shelter warred with his predatory nature. Ilara wrapped the fur around her shoulders, its warmth seeping into her like a balm, chasing the numbness from her toes. She sank onto a stone ledge smoothed by time, the locket pressing against her chest as her breath steadied. The steam from the pools curled upward, veiling the space in a haze that softened the edges of reality, making Draven's silhouette blur into myth. "Why help me?" she asked, her voice threading through the crackle of the fire. "A wolf in your lands. I'm trespass prey. Your kind devours such mistakes." He knelt by the flames, adding twisted roots that released a scent of earth and spice, his gaze fixed on the dancing light rather than her. The scar along his jaw caught the glow, silvering it like moonlight on bloodied snow. "Prey? Perhaps, but I sense no malice in you, only the fracture of betrayal." His words carried the weight of confession, low and resonant, stirring the air between them. Ilara's fingers traced the locket's edge, the dried blood within flaking slightly under her touch, a reminder of her own spilled trust. She watched him, the way his shoulders bore an invisible yoke, the guilt shadowing his features like perpetual dusk. The cavern trembled then, a distant roar filtering through the stone. Pursuers, not of fur and fang, but of claw and venom. Draven's head snapped up, eyes narrowing as he rose fluidly, hand drifting to his sword. "Scouts from the rival covens," he growled, the sound vibrating through her bones. "They scent weakness in my borders, drawn by the unrest in my court. And now, your arrival stirs the old pacts." Ilara's heart lurched. She had brought this storm upon him, her exile a spark in his shadowed realm. But as he positioned himself between her and the entrance, broad back a barrier of unyielding resolve, something shifted within her, an empathy uncoiling like roots in thawed earth. She rose, shedding the fur, her wolf spirit awakening in the face of threat. "I won't cower," she said, voice steadier than she felt. The locket hummed, sinking with the fire's crackle, as if urging her forward. Draven glanced back, surprise flickering in his silver depths, and for the first time, she saw not just the king, but the man beneath, haunted by choices that had cost him more than eternity could mend. "The packs taught me to fight for scraps of belonging," she continued, stepping to his side. "Let me stand with you." The entrance shuddered again, stone dust sifting down as claws scraped outside. Vampire thralls, twisted by dark rites, their hisses a chorus of hunger. Draven drew his blade, the runes igniting in blue flame, illuminating the scar that mirrored her locket's etched phases. "Foolish wolf," he murmured, but there was no bite in it, only a reluctant warmth. "Stay close." Together they braced, her bare hands curling into fists, nails lengthening instinctively as her shift hovered on the edge. The breach came swift. A hulking form burst through, eyes glowing feral red, fangs bared in a snarl that reeked of rot and ambition. Draven lunged, sword arcing in a blur of steel and sorcery, severing limb from torso with a wet crunch. Blood, black and viscous, splattered the quartz, steaming on contact. Ilara dodged a second assailant, her agility born of pack chases now turned to survival, driving her knee into its midsection before Draven's blade finished it. Their movements synced without words, a dance of instinct and necessity, her empathy weaving through the chaos like moonlight, piercing storm clouds. As the last scout crumpled, the cavern fell silent save for their ragged breaths mingling with the steam. Draven sheathed his weapon, turning to her with eyes that held not triumph, but a deepening fracture. A gash wept blood along his arm, dark crimson staining his sleeve, and without thought, Ilara pressed her palm to it, the locket's chain dangling between them. Her touch was tentative, Omega instincts flaring to soothe, and he stiffened, then stilled, the wound's heat pulsing against her skin like a shared secret. "You fight like one who has lost everything," he said softly, his voice threading vulnerability into the air. "Yet you offer mercy to a monster." "And you shield a stray from your own shadows," she replied, her fingers lingering, the bond forming not in passion's rush, but in the quiet forge of mutual wounds. The fire popped, casting their faces in gold and red, the locket's warmth spreading from her chest to the space between. Outside, the wind wailed, but here, in this refugio carved from ice and fire, empathy bloomed into something unbreakable, a tether against the encroaching night. Draven's hand covered hers, gloved leather rough against her skin, and in that touch, the guilt in his eyes met her shame, forging a vow unspoken. The moon's light filtered stronger now, bathing them in silver, as if the Dusa approved this fragile alliance. But deeper still, Ilara felt the pull of destiny's thread, resisted yet insistent, binding exile to king in the heart of the storm. What strength lay in such mercy when power demanded solitude? The question hung, heavy as the blood on the stone, as they tended their wounds in the fire's glow. The fire's embers pulsed like a dying heart in the cavern's heart, casting elongated shadows that danced across the quartz-veined walls, turning the space into a cathedral of secrets and scars. Ilara sat cross-legged on the furs, her fingers still tingling from the warmth of Draven's blood beneath her touch, the metallic tang lingering in the air like an unspoken promise. The gash on his arm had knit under her instinctive care, not fully healed but stanched, the dark crimson flow reduced to a sluggish seep that stained the fur beneath them. She hadn't meant to draw on her Omega gifts so deeply. It was reflex, born of years mending the pack's wounds, but here, in this alien refuge, it felt like invoking a forbidden right. The locket at her throat thrummed in response, its silver surface warming as if the dried blood within stirred, awakening to the night's deeper currents. Draven watched her from across the flames, his silver-crimson eyes reflecting the fire's glow like polished hematite, unblinking and profound. He had peeled back the sleeve of his leather armor, exposing the pale expanse of his forearm, where veins traced faint blue rivers beneath skin cool as marble. The scar along his jaw caught the light, a silvery crescent that mirrored the locket's etched phases, and Ilara wondered, not for the first time, what ancient wound it commemorated. A betrayal, perhaps, or a choice that had crowned him king at the cost of his soul. He moved with deliberate slowness, as if every gesture warred against the predator coiled within, and when he spoke, his voice wove through the steam rising from the pools like smoke from a ritual pyre. "Your touch, it carries more than mercy, Wolfkin. It mends what centuries have frayed." She withdrew her hand, curling it against her chest where the locket pressed, its chain a cool weight against her fevered skin. The cavern's warmth clashed with the chill seeping from the sealed entrance, a reminder of the storm raging beyond, winds howling like vengeful spirits, carrying the faint, acrid scent of more intruders circling the veil. Empathy had bound them in the fight, but now, in this fragile truce, doubt crept in like frost on glass. What was she to him? A curiosity, a tool against his coven's unrest? Her wolf spirit paced restlessly within, sensing the undercurrents of his guilt, a shadow that mirrored her own exile's ache. "It's nothing," she murmured, gaze dropping to the fire. "Just what Omegas do, ease the pain of the strong. My pack called it weakness, fit only for the hearth's edge." He leaned forward, the flames illuminating the hollows of his cheeks, the faint stubble that spoke of nights too long for rest. A low rumble escaped him, not a laugh, but a sound laced with bitter recognition. Weakness? No, it is the thread that unravels curses. His words hung heavy, pulling at her like the moon's gravity on the tides. Ilara met his eyes then, and the world narrowed to that crimson-silver stare, stripping away the cavern's illusions. She felt exposed, not just in body, her tunic torn and bloodied from the skirmish, but in spirit, as if he peered into the fractures her rejection had carved. The locket burned hotter, an insistent pulse syncing with her heartbeat, and suddenly, visions flickered at the edges of her mind. Not memories, but fragments of something vast and veiled. The air thickened, steam coiling tighter around them as the fire spat sparks upward, illuminating runes etched into the cavern's ceiling, ancient vampire sigils that glowed faintly in response. Ilara gasped, her vision blurring as the locket's warmth surged through her veins like liquid moonlight. Images flooded her. A throne room of black ice, splintering under betrayal's weight. Dreven's hand stained with the blood of kin he had slain to claim his crown, a curse whispered by a dying rival that bound his heart in eternal frost, unable to fully trust, to fully love, lest it shatter his realm anew. She saw herself there, not as intruder, but as beacon, her blood in the locket mingled with her mother's lineage, carrying the Deusa's gift of the Pathfinder, a seer of hidden paths, one who could illuminate the moral crossroads where kings faltered. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as the visions crested, the cavern tilting in her sight. Her hands trembled, reaching for the locket, but it was as if the blood within had ignited, drawing forth the dormant power her pack had never seen, dismissing her empathy as mere softness. The steam parted like a veil, and Draven's face sharpened into focus, his expression shifting from wariness to awe. He rose in a fluid motion, closing the distance without touch, his presence a gravitational pull that made the air hum. "What do you see?" His voice was urgent now, threaded with a vulnerability that cracked his regal facade, the guilt in his eyes flaring like embers fanned to life. Ilara's breath came in shallow bursts, the visions receding but leaving echoes. His past a labyrinth of regret, his future a fork where compassion could thaw the curse, if he chose her as guide. You, your crown forged in blood, a betrayal that freezes your heart, makes every alliance a blade at your throat. The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, her Omega voice resonating with the cavern's quartz, amplifying like a temple's echo. "The Deusa marked me for this, not exile, but purpose, the Pathfinder's sight. My blood calls to yours, shows the path to redemption, if you dare walk it." Draven stilled, his gloved hand hovering near her cheek, not daring to bridge the chasm her revelation had carved. The scar on his jaw seemed to pulse, silver against his paling skin, and for the first time, fear flickered in his immortal gaze, not of her, but of the hope she dangled, fragile as a snowflake on flame. "Impossible," he breathed, yet his voice betrayed the lie, laced with the melancholy of one who had long forsaken destiny's weave. A wolf's blood, an Omega's gift, to unmake a vampire's doom? The covens would call it heresy, the pack's abomination. But beneath the denial, recognition dawned. She was the key, the missing phase in his lunar curse, her locket's blood the elixir to melt the frost of his isolation. The cavern trembled again, deeper this time, as if the earth sensed the shift, distant uivos mingling with vampiric hisses beyond the stone, the rival covens closing in, drawn by the ripple of her awakening. Ilara rose to meet him, the locket cooling now, its purpose revealed in the fire's dying light. Strength, she thought, was not in fangs or thrones, but in choosing the light amid shadows. Draven's eyes held hers, the bond deepening from empathy to inevitability, resisted no longer. In her, he saw not prey, but salvation's edge, a consort forged in exile's fire, if fate's trial allowed. Yet as the stone groaned under approaching siege, the weight of what she had unleashed settled like snow on burdened branches. Her gift had manifested, illuminating his destiny, but at what cost to her fragile freedom? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The stone walls of the cavern quivered like the flanks of a wounded beast, dust sifting from the ceiling in fine veils that caught the fire's dying glow and turned to gold before settling on Ilara's shoulders. Her revelation hung in the steam-thick air, a fragile bridge between them, but the encroaching rumble shattered the moment, claws raking stone, hisses slithering through fissures like serpents in the earth. Draven's hand finally bridged the gap, fingers grazing her arm with a touch cool as shadowed marble, yet searing in its intent. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice a low thunder that vibrated through her bones, but his eyes betrayed the fracture. The king who shielded her now glimpsed the unraveling of his solitary reign. Ilara nodded, her wolf spirit coiling tight within, the locket's pulse a war drum against her chest. The visions of his past lingered at her vision's edge, bloodied thrones, a traitor's whisper that had cursed his bloodline to eternal distrust. But they sharpened now with the threat's approach, her pathfinder gift unfurling like moonlight on fractured ice. She felt the paths branching, one of war's crimson tide, another of mercy's uncertain thaw. Freedom whispered to her, a siren's call to flee into the night, reclaiming the wild exile her pack had forced upon her. Yet love's shadow stirred, not as reward, but as trial, binding her to this vampire's guilt-ridden fate. The entrance exploded inward with a roar of splintered rock, shards flying like shrapnel under the moon's indirect gaze filtering through the breach. Figures poured in, vampire thralls twisted by dark allegiance, their eyes feral red, fangs elongated in snarls that reeked of ambition and rot. Leading them was a silhouette sharper than the rest, tall, gaunt, with hair like spun silver and a cloak embroidered in the rival coven's insignia, a thorned rose frozen in obsidian thread. Lord Vesper, Draven's once sworn brother, the traitor whose betrayal had ignited the curse centuries ago, his face a mask of vindictive triumph scarred by the same silver line that marked Draven's jaw, a twin wound from their final clash. "Vesper," Draven growled, blade drawn in a whisper of steel, runes igniting blue against the intruder's pallor. The air thickened with the scent of cold blood and ancient enmity, the cavern's steam parting to reveal the standoff. Ilara's heart hammered, her bare feet rooted to the fur-strewn floor as memories not her own flooded her. Vesper's ambition, poisoning the court with whispers of weakness in Draven's merciful rule, culminating in a coup that spilled kin's blood under a blood moon. The locket burned, drawing her into the fray's moral web. Forgive the betrayer and risk the kingdom's fall, or wage war and mirror the violence that had broken her king. The thralls lunged, a tide of claws and venom, but Draven moved like liquid night, his sword carving arcs that severed limbs with wet thuds, black ichor spraying the quartz walls in viscous arcs. Ilara dodged a lunging form, her agility a blur of pack-honed instinct, nails shifting to claws as she raked across a thrall's throat, hot blood, her own kind's warmth mingled with the undead chill, splattering her tunic. The metallic tang filled her nostrils, mingling with the cavern's mineral steam, and she felt the wind from the breach howling in, carrying distant wolf howls that twisted her gut. Her pack, drawn by the border's unrest, their rejection now a vengeful pursuit across the veil. Vesper circled, his laughter a rasp like grinding ice, eyes locking on Ilara with predatory curiosity. The king hides behind a wolf bitch? How the mighty crumble. He struck then, faster than shadow, his blade clashing against Draven's in a shower of sparks that illuminated the cavern like fallen stars. The force rippled through the air, knocking Ilara back against a steaming pool. The heat lapping at her skin as she rose, the locket swinging free, its bloodied core catching the melee's light. Vision surged. Vesper's path, forked by regret he had buried under power's hunger. Draven's choice to kill his brother again and seal the curse eternal, or offer the hand of reconciliation that could shatter both their realms. From the breach, wolf forms slunk in, her former pack, led by the beta who had rejected her, his fur matted with snow, eyes gleaming with territorial fury. "Traitor Omega!" he snarled, voice a guttural echo in the chaos, fangs bared at the vampire's incursion. "You flee to monsters? We'll drag you back for judgment." The cavern devolved into bedlam, wolves snapping at thralls, Draven and Vesper locked in a deadly waltz, blades singing through the steam. Ilara's world narrowed to the locket's insistent hum, her gift illuminating the ethical crossroads. Love demanded she intervene, weaving paths of forgiveness to heal Draven's wound. But freedom urged her to slip away, leaving the kings to their war, reclaiming her solitude unshackled. She moved through the fray, empathy a shield and weapon, her touch disarming a thrall with a surge of soothing calm that dropped it limp, then turning to the beta, whose rejection still ached like silver in her veins. "This isn't your ground," she said, voice steady amid the snarls, her claws extended but unused. His eyes widened, surprise flickering before rage, but the locket pulsed, revealing his path. Driven by pack politics, his renunciation a bid for alpha favor, not true disdain. Forgiveness tempted her, a moral balm to end the cycle, yet war's pull was strong. The pack's betrayal fueling a righteous fury that mirrored Draven's own. Draven broke free from Vesper, blood, his own, dark and reluctant, streaming from a gash across his chest, staining his armor in rivulets that steamed on the stone. He staggered toward her, eyes meeting hers across the melee, the guilt therein a plea. Choose us. Choose redemption over the solitude that had birthed his curse. Vesper pressed the advantage, blade raised for the killing blow, but Ilara's voice cut through, amplified by her awakening gift. "Enough. Blood for blood only freezes the heart." The words resonated, the cavern's runes flaring silver, and for a heartbeat the chaos stilled. Wolves pausing, thralls hesitating, Vesper's arm trembling mid-strike. The beta lunged at her then, jaws snapping, forcing her choice. Slash with claws and embrace war's freedom, or extend mercy and bind her fate to Draven's shadowed throne. Her hand hovered, the locket's warmth flooding her with the deuce's whisper. What is strength, if not choosing compassion amid the storm? Pain lanced her side as fangs grazed her, blood blooming warm and red. But she held, whispering forgiveness to the beta's snarling form, her touch easing his rage into confusion. Vesper faltered, Draven's blade at his throat, and in that suspended breath, Ilara saw the paths converge. Love as trial, demanding she sacrifice her wild freedom for the king's thawing heart, or flee into the night, leaving redemption unclaimed. The wind howled through the breach, carrying the moon's crimson gaze, and Ilara's blood mingled with the cavern floor's stains, a symbolic offering. Draven's eyes implored, the weight of his past crashing against her resolve. Forgive or war, unite or shatter. In that visceral clash, her spirit teetered on the ethical precipice, the locket's blood the scale's tipping point, as the night demanded her soul's verdict. The cavern's breath heaved with the fury of the storm outside, steam and blood mingling in a haze that blurred the boundaries between ally and enemy, mercy and vengeance. Ilara's side throbbed where the beta's fangs had grazed her, warm crimson seeping through her torn tunic to pool on the fur-strewn floor, each drop a petal, unfurling in the fire's dying embers. The locket swung heavy against her chest, its silver chain slick with sweat and ichor, the dried blood within pulsing like a second heart, urging her toward the precipice of choice. Visions cascaded through her pathfinder sight, forked paths of silver moonlight, one where she unleashed her claws on the beta, carving freedom from the pack's chains in a spray of red that would echo her rejection's pain. Another where her touch extended forgiveness, weaving Draven's thawing redemption into her own rebirth at the cost of her solitary wildness. Draven's blade hovered at Vesper's throat, the runes along its edge flickering blue against the traitor's pale skin, his brother's eyes, mirrors of his own crimson-silver depths, wide with a mix of hatred and buried regret. The vampire king's chest heaved, blood from his gash tracing rivulets down his armor, staining the black leather in deep scarlet veins that steamed faintly in the cavern's geothermal warmth. His gaze locked on Ilara across the frozen melee. The wolves and thralls paused in a tableau of snarls and hisses, the wind from the breach carrying weavos that twisted like knives in her gut. Her pack's chorus, now a dirge for the life she had fled. Guilt etched his features deeper than the scar on his jaw. That silvery crescent, a twin to the locket's phases, whispering of the betrayal that had cursed him to this eternal frost. Vesper's ambition, spilling kin's blood under a crimson moon, binding Draven's heart in distrust's unyielding grip. Vesper's laughter rasped again, brittle as cracking ice, his gaunt frame trembling under the blade's pressure. End it, brother, or let the wolf whore decide your fate. Her blood reeks of meddling gods, Pathfinder delusions to unmake what I forged. The words slithered through the air, laced with the scent of decay and old wounds, stirring the thralls into a low growl that vibrated the court's walls. Ilara's beta, former mate, his fur matted with snow and fury, crouched low, yellow eyes fixed on her, the rejection's sting now a weapon he wielded with pack pride. "Choose, outcast," he snarled, voice a guttural rumble echoing the distant thunder outside. "Fight with us, or die as the traitor's consort in this undead pit." The locket burned, a searing anchor pulling her forward through the haze, its warmth flooding her veins with the Deuce's unyielding light. Strength, she realized in that visceral clarity, was not the fang's swift strike or the throne's cold command, but the mercy that bridged shattered oaths, choosing love's trial over freedom's lonely howl. Her blood, spilled and sacred, was no curse but the key to Renascimento, mingling Omega empathy with vampire shadow to heal what exile and betrayal had fractured. She stepped into the Frey's heart, bare feet silent on the blood-slick stone, the steam parting like a veil before her awakened gift. The cavern's runes flared silver in response, illuminating her form in ethereal glow, the moon's crimson light piercing the breach to bathe her in fractured halos. "No more blood for blood," she declared, her voice resonating like a lunar hymn, amplified by the locket's thrum and the quartz's echo. The words wove through the chaos, a philosophical tether drawing the combatants still. Wolves whining low, thralls recoiling as if burned. She reached the beta first, her hand extending not in claw but palm up, the wound on her side a blooming rose of red against her skin. He lunged, jaws parting, but her touch met his furred shoulder, gentle, insistent, channeling the Pathfinder's sight into a flood of revealed paths. His renunciation born not of true disdain, but fear of her wild spirit upending the pack's rigid order, a choice that had hollowed him as deeply as her exile. "Forgive," she whispered, the word a balm of moonlight on frostbite, easing the rage from his eyes until he stilled, trembling, the bond's fracture mending not in reunion, but release. He backed away, packmates following with hesitant whines, the wind swallowing their retreat into the night beyond the veil. Vesper twisted under Draven's blade, his silver hair whipping as he sought escape, but Ilara turned to them, the locket's chain glinting like a noose of destiny. "Brother's blood freezes the soul," she said, visions pouring forth unbidden. Vesper's path, shadowed by ambition's regret, a fork where reconciliation could redeem the curse without death's finality. Draven's hand faltered, the king's melancholy cracking wide, the guilt of centuries, the duty that had isolated him in eternal dusk, now confronted by her light. "She speaks truth," he murmured, voice raw as exposed vein, lowering the blade inch by inch. Vesper froze, eyes widening in disbelief, the thorned rose on his cloak catching the fire's last sparks. But as Ilara's gift illuminated his hidden remorse, the love twisted into betrayal. He knelt, not in defeat, but surrender, the air thick with the scent of thawing ice and fresh forged peace. The cavern sighed, the rumble fading as the storm outside softened to a mournful wind, weavos distant now, like echoes of forgotten wars. Draven sheathed his sword, turning to Alara with eyes stripped of shadow, the crimson flecks softening to silver under the moon's approving gaze. He drew her close, gloved hand cupping her face, the cool leather a contrast to the warmth blooming in her chest, the locket cooling at last, its bloodied core spent in the act of union. "You are my consort," he whispered, the words a vow etched in blood and moonlight, not possession but partnership, her pathfinder light the cure to his frost-bound heart. She leaned into him, the pain in her side a fading ache, her wolf spirit curling content in this renascimento, rejection transmuted to destiny, love as the ultimate proof, demanding sacrifice of her wild freedom for the shared throne of redemption. They stood amid the settling dust, Vesper rising to pledge uneasy alliance, the pack's shadows retreating into the snow-veiled night, the fire guttered low, casting their entwined forms in gold and red, the quartz walls gleaming like stars in a Gothic cathedral. Alara's fingers traced Draven's scar, mirroring her locket's phases, as the Deuce's whisper affirmed, every wound healed one, every omega born to crown the fallen. In this lunar embrace, pain yielded to rebirth, the forbidden lands no longer exile but home, their bond aflame against the encroaching dusk. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.